Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. As we were talking about a little bit last hour, we've got the collection of new Bolshevik protest groups descending on Chicago. They were out in force, but on their best behavior yesterday, marching down Michigan Avenue through the Loop.
Is this really good behavior when they're calling cops pigs?
It's as close as they get to responsible behavior. But again, Jillian Melchior's piece over in the Journal talks about just some of the groups that are part of this conglomeration of Bolshevik organizations. Behind Enemy Lines, in particular, is been noted in some of the lead up to the convention as a proponent of violence. But there are Palestine Action U.S. encourages vandalism and other unlawful acts, as do other organizations. And remember, the whole play here is solidarity and marginality. This is how you have Queers for Palestine, for example. It's for reproductive rights. It's to save the planet by eliminating combustion engine. It's to forgive student loan debt. It's to forgive mortgage debt, to forgive credit card debt. It's to defund the police. It's to abolish ICE. It's to set up more migrant shelters. It's
everything to everyone.
The full panoply of leftist grievances. And so you make my fight and I'll make your fight, the solidarity and marginality play. We're all victims. You take up my plight and I will take up your plight. We'll do it all together. And what we've taught them, as I keep saying, what are they protesting? What are they protesting? This is what the police chief in Ferguson said last week.
Oh, that's right.
A week ago Friday, when they protest there turned violent and a police officer was seriously injured, brain injury. Still don't know the status, the updated status on that officer in Ferguson. But that we've given them everything they want. What are they protesting? Well, right. You just answered your own question. Because their violent, lawless, intemperate conduct produces results for them. You will beget more violent, lawless, intemperate conduct to get new stuff that they want. That's exactly what they're counting on. They're counting on politicians like BLM Brandon, who genuflect before these Bolshevik mobsters. For more on all this, we're pleased to be joined by Gerlad Steinberg. He's the president of NGO Monitor. He's also a poli-sci professor at Bar-Ilan University. Gerlad Steinberg, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
You're, actually, I read a piece by your COO, Naftali Balanson, about who are behind the groups and individuals behind these pro-Hamas protests, including what we have seen already this week and what we'll see more of. So give us a bit of a handle on the landscape.
A lot of these groups, first of all, that you're talking about, there's a list of at least 50 different organizations they claim. Some of them are just one person. Some of them have been around for a long time, like Code Pink. Some are connected to the terrorist, Palestinian terrorist organizations like Semi Dune. Their flags are all over the place. So we're looking at a network. And the way we started to do the research on this was that we saw and examined, that's what this organization that I founded and run called NGO Monitor does. We see that there are many organizations that say they're for human rights or for democracy or for all the causes that you just listed. They're called non-governmental organizations. But they don't really have any kind of formal registration, mostly. They raise money, but in very, very shadowy ways. They manipulate the IRS regulations, which are supposed to regulate nonprofits. And those are the organizations that actually put together, funded, supported the mobs that we saw on all the university campuses, and then spilling over into the cities and the city councils, all of them for the cause of Hamas, all of them saying, let's destroy Israel. And yay, Hamas, let's have intifada now, from the river to the sea. They're exporting, or actually they're not exporting, it's the same organizations, many of the same people, are now in Chicago, and their goal, exactly as you described it, is to intimidate not just the delegates to the convention, but the entire Democratic Party, led by Kamala Harris, so that they will be able to get their demands, which include everything possible to destroy the state of Israel, but also they're anti-American, they're anti-capitalist, they're anti-democratic. There is a whole laundry list of causes that it's not just left-wing. This is radical left. This is revolutionary. It's interesting to use the term Bolshevik because there's some commonalities there. It's also the Muslim Brotherhood, which is basically a jihadist organization. So you have all these elements together and a lot of hidden money, and that's a key issue. Where's all the money coming from? Who paid for all this?
Well, who did?
Yeah.
Who's on the list as possibilities?
Yeah, there's a list, but until you know what it is, and I think that's the job of the IRS and the Treasury, they've got to start clamping down on this stuff. Could it be foreign money? Could it be Qatar? Could it be some other sources of money? Could it be Chinese Communist Party money? Could it be all interested in destabilizing the American democratic system? Until we have some answers, we can really speculate. But it's a serious issue.
But there was sort of some experts in the space during the height of the campus encampments and ugliness from the Ivy League all the way across to UCLA. You had people who know about these groups like Students for Justice in Palestine, who talked about money from Iran making its way to these quote unquote, student groups that are supposed to, be presented as just sort of organic, campus groups. And then one person sets up another chapter at a college, just like Model UN or something like that. But that, yeah, right. But there were ties, if at minimum logical ties back to state sponsors of terror and those terrorist organizations they sponsor, for example, Iran.
There are ties. There are all sorts of indications. We have Semi-Dun, this Palestine Liberation Organization, the Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine, which is a terrorist organization. They blew up airplanes in the 70s. They're blowing up other things. They're killing. So one of their top people who lives in Vancouver, Canada, of all places, was just getting an award, of Human Rights Award, in Tehran, from the Islamic Republic, from the people who bring us all this terrorism that we see all over the place. Now, we don't know what the money connection is. There are some dots out there, but we can't connect them because they hide it. They're very good at hiding it. There's a whole lot of money coming in that goes through what are called pass-throughs. There's something called the Tides Foundation, which has got like $100 million, hundreds of millions of dollars, I think like $1 billion. But there's no indication, no information of who's paying for that. It all gets funneled through this giant sieve. And that's all legal under the current IRS regulations, but it really needs to be looked into. They're probably also paying salaries. When the campus mob started to rampage and intimidate, and they said, well, these are all volunteers who are outraged by what they see on television about Gaza. Well, this organization called Students for Justice in Palestine that you mentioned, it's been around for 30 years. They've been carefully developing this network where they claim to have 300 different branches on campuses. They've got to be a lot of people who are paid. Where's the money coming from for their salaries? And these are perpetual students. There's some people who were there 5, 10 years ago, same names. And by the way, most of the people who run these organizations are Muslim, have Muslim names, have Arab names. Some of them are Palestinian. And then there are a whole lot of what they used to call in the days of the Soviet Empire useful idiots, people who join. They have no idea what they're doing, but they're joining either because they see a lot of action or because they're anti-Western. It's all this intersectionality that you talked about earlier. So it's a real combination. It's a mishmash of groups. But I think the main point that I want to make is there's no oversight. There's no checks and balances. There's no public information who's paying for all this, and that's critical in a democratic society.
Yeah, it's I was just thinking as you were talking. I mean, we have had incidents even here in Chicagoland. I mean, the indictments of individuals involved with the Holy Land Foundation, which was basically a terrorist front masquerading as a charity. But it's been a while since you've seen some, as you say, sort of federal oversight and look into some of these organizations that there's enough smoke around them where somebody should be checking out if there's a fire.
There certainly is, and that's something that now I think is finally on the agenda. Members of Congress, like Virginia Fox, have introduced maybe not legislation, I don't remember where it stands, but they've certainly sent letters to the Secretary of Treasury, Janet Yellen, with a list of a number of these organizations saying, we need to know where their funding's coming from. The American public needs to know where their funding is coming from. The fact that you have to have a head of a congressional committee, education committee, investigating the anti-Semitism, the hate, the mob violence, the intimidation on university campuses. And again, I'm talking to you, you're in Chicago. These are the same organizations, the same people that are out there on the streets doing what they're doing out there to disrupt it and to intimidate the Democratic Party. That's their goal out there, so that they can enforce their agenda. So who's behind them? And I think the American public certainly has the right to know that. And that's something that the government has to start to deal with. They deal with it seriously. These are not small, voluntary, non-governmental organizations called sometimes civil society, a handful of well-intentioned people who want to go and campaign for political prisoners behind the Iron Curtain, like Amnesty International started in the 1960s, or Human Rights Watch when it started operating. These are now these two organizations and all of their offshoots and all their allies, including the Students for Justice in Palestine. These are the ones out now that are trying to really impose their agenda, their anti-Western, anti-American, and anti-Semitic agenda on the United States. And if there's a lot of money that's coming in from foreign governments, the American public has the right to know.
And the anticipation for this week, I mean, knowing what you know about these organizations, are they sophisticated enough? Do they have the ability to restrain themselves enough to present a show of force to remind the party to which they sort of otherwise affiliate by necessity that we're your base and we know you're afraid of us and we can take you apart at any point in time, but we want you to win first so that we can extract demands from you, and they exercise some restraint? Or is it just beyond their capacity to be so restrained?
Well, what we've seen in the last 10 months on campuses is zero restraint because they won everything. They just forced out the president of Columbia University, a Muslim woman, whose major sin was that she agreed with some of the critics that there was anti-Semitism, but she tried to accommodate them. They pushed her out. They forced her to resign. And so I don't think there's any sign of restraint. Again, I go back to your original characterization of them as Bolsheviks. When you think you're winning, when you're on a roll, then you just keep going. I don't think they really care about the outcome of the elections. They want to impose their agenda. And the way to do that is starting off in Chicago.
Well,
and unless there's really strong pushback, unless all violation of law is being handled directly and not just to the usual roundup some suspects and then dismiss them, no charges against them, which is what we've seen on university campuses for 10 months, they're going to see that as great victory.
yeah. And besides the DNC starting today, classes begin at a number of universities throughout the country. What do you expect this fall?
Oh, the fall, I think, is going to be just like it was last year. They're just going to keep going, again, because they see themselves as on a roll, as being very successful. There's no serious attempt on most campuses. There are a few exceptions, but on most campuses, the administrators and the faculty have backed down or joined in. You've got faculty on a lot of these campuses that are part of that same problem, exactly the same diagnosis, symptoms. So I think there's no reason to expect. Power only gets defeated by other power. They don't suddenly decide that they've got to have a strategy of cautious, careful infiltration. They're going to go for the jugular. And again, what they saw last year was that they won all their everybody caved to their non-negotiable demands: the use of violence, the use of threat, the use of intimidation, the silencing of events, classes, speakers they don't like. They're just going to keep going.
What's your general assessment of the landscape right now? And what's the threat level? And do you think that whatever you think the threat level is appreciated by the Jewish community first and foremost, but not limited to the Jewish community, and sort of Americans more generally about what's happening on college campuses, what's happening in the streets of major cities, what we're going to see this week, and what that represents in terms of the path this country is on?
A large part of the Jewish community is aware. I think that there are different views about how to deal with it. there's a view that you got to fight it, hard, you got to go with any allies that you can that are going to fight it. And there's some who say, look, we're a weak, small community, we're isolated, we have no allies, so we got to just try to keep our heads down and go and try to rebuild some of those relationships with liberals. I think that's probably a hopeless attempt because all the liberal allies have abandoned the Jewish people certainly since not just October 7th, the atrocities that we saw, but for years that's been the case. So, but certainly that's the core issue among American Jews from what I can see. In the broader American community, it's hard to know. I'm sitting in Jerusalem talking to you, so I can't assess. I do travel back and forth occasionally. I was on campus, did some campus talks back in I guess it was April, but it's hard to assess. But I think that to a large part of the the United States, as you know, is very much polarized, divided. But I think there is certainly among a large portion of the American public assessment, a straightforward assessment of where the threats are from these kinds of mobs and the intimidation. And they're drunk with success, with power. Look what a small number of people can do by intimidating and threatening basically the peace of most communities. We can get city councils to pass resolutions that call for the end of Israel or call Israel doing genocide, all sorts of propaganda, hate propaganda, intimidating synagogues, Jews, all sorts of attacking synagogues and Jews, and largely getting away with it. All those things are signs of a much deeper hatred of the West, of the United States, of democracy, all those things together. And I think there's not a deep appreciation of how deep the threat is.
Gerlad Steinberg is the president of NGO Monitor. He's also a professor of poli-sci at Bar-Ilan University. Gerlad Steinberg, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Did you and your family lose Illinois Medicaid and need health coverage? Check this out. You may be eligible to enroll in a low-cost health plan at healthcare.gov. With the new law, 4 out of 5 customers can find a plan for $10 or less per month with financial help. Healthcare.gov offers quality plans that cover doctor visits, prescriptions, emergency care, and more. Healthcare.gov is here for you.